Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 250, and I hope you're all having an amazing weekend so far. And wow, the 250th Red Pill. I honestly can't believe it. A quarter of 1,000 podcasts, 250 weeks straight, and year 5 for our Mastermind community is right around the corner. And I'm not going to lie, this kind of makes me emotional thinking about everything over these past 5 years, looking back and now seeing where everything is today. I'm just super grateful for our community and what we're doing here. And this milestone of 250 Red Pill podcasts, it really inspires me to keep going and get better at my craft every week. And I'm more committed than ever to my vision and my plan for this platform that we've grown here in 2026. And I know things feel uncertain in the world right now, but you need to tap into that energy and transmute it to become your fuel, especially right now, while unfortunately the masses have their gaslight blinking at them. When the world's gas tank is on empty, it can of course bring you down with it. But for my wolves here, don't let them take that life force from you. We have something special here, and if the world around you feels shaky, just remember it was designed that way. And if you're here at this place in this very moment, it's for a reason, to be the light that shines through the darkness. Don't forget that. And I'm sorry to those who don't care about what I'm saying right now. I'm just being authentic, and I'm personally doing everything in my power behind the scenes to preserve my power, and I just want to pass some of that along to you. So if you resonate, beautiful. And if you don't, I respect that too. And moving forward, I'm really going to do my part to focus on inspiring every day instead of discouraging. And if you personally feel like I've been discouraging, then I want you to know that I'm grateful for that honest feedback, and I'm sincerely going to work on that this year. Although it's always been my intent to inspire and to create things that inspire people, I know that that's not always how I present myself. So entering this new year and being ruthlessly honest with myself is the only way to level up and to continue to tap into all the conscious beings in the world, which all of you are. And I'm truly grateful to be surrounded by such incredible people. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Now, we have a lot to cover today, as you can imagine, so I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get into today's Red Pill podcast. 250, man. Can't believe it. But quickly, before we get started, just make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer or any beverage of your choice. I'm just going with some water with some liquid magnesium added to it. Very boring. Kind of on my health grind right now. And also, please make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in the next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure that you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. In the event that it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of that altcoin and the ticker symbol as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 will be selected for next week's Red Pill. Now, over the past 7 weeks, you've heard me talk a lot about the specific date of January 6th into January 7th in every update post and Red Pill podcast here. And now that this key date has come and gone, we can see that pretty much every single cryptocurrency pumped into that exact date, and then everything immediately stalled out since that date. Which, I gotta admit, this sort of blew my mind because I wasn't even expecting the effect to be so similar to how it was back on November 21st when Bitcoin effectively crashed into that particular date. And now that we've seen this recent move occur, there's really no denying the power of this 47 code that we've been talking about here, especially for the crypto market. And now, of course, we want to move on from this date now that it's behind us. But just really quickly, for those who are new here, which, by the way, welcome to the Wolf Pack. I was able to identify this key date of January 6th into 7th by decoding the move that Bitcoin had from its current all-time high over here on October 6th into the crash lows of November 21st. I'll just quickly show you that over here, 2025. And you'll see that those two dates are 47 days apart. And also what's so special about November 21st is it was within the 47th week of the last year of 2025. So naturally, I actually measured from this date of November 21st over to 47 days, and it landed on January 6th into January 7th, depending if you count the end date or not. So we've been going over this for quite a while now, and my specific outlook for that time frame, which I shared in the Red Pill podcast on Sunday, November 23rd, just 2 days after that pivot low that happened on November 21st, was that I was personally expecting Bitcoin and the entire crypto market as a whole to experience 47 days of sideways price action, essentially mimicking what Bitcoin did in late May into early July last year, which was 47 days of sideways at the highs of the trading range right over here. But this time around, I was expecting 47 days of sideways at the lows of this trading range, followed by what I called scenario number 2, which is a true relief rally that breaks above this sideways trading range that we've been in for the past couple months. And scenario number 2 is what I covered thoroughly in last week's Red Pill, so definitely watch that if you haven't already, because I go into that whole setup in depth during that podcast. And also, since it's a what I'm investing in special, you'll get to see me cover the charts of over 25 different altcoin charts. So that podcast is absolutely packed with value from start to finish, and I'm sure you'll pick up some gems along the way. One other quick thing to mention before we keep going on with regards to my 47 days of sideways and how it was kind of tied to my theory over here of what May into July was like. Just remember, this date that we bottomed on was April 7th, the 4-7 date. And from here to here took 47 days. And then from here to here took 47 days till we hit a new all-time high. From here to here took 47 days, and then from here to here took 47 days. Now, a lot of people might have got a little bit confused thinking that starting this January 8th, for example, that we were like immediately going to enter a straight line breakout. And I've never said that. What I did say, though, is to expect us to be sideways during this time frame, because going back to the start of this crash, when the crash really started to bottom out, what I was trying to prevent was our wolf pack assuming that we're just going to pop right back up into an immediate relief rally, which is kind of like what happened over here in the end of the 2017 cycle, where we had a major correction, which, by the way, this was pretty dramatic. I know it doesn't look like it until you measure it. It was 45%. And then we immediately pop back up before going down again. That was what I was trying to prevent us from assuming, because also a lot of people in our community bring things to my attention and I share my thoughts following up on perhaps some things that other analysts are talking about. And I do my best to interpret how everything's going without allowing anything else to get in the way of my analysis. So I'm always receptive of all of your feedback. If you guys have things that are kind of circulating on the mainstream and you bring it to my attention, I will of course entertain it, but I try to not let it corrupt my personal investment thesis, and I urge you to do the same. That would also go for what I personally am expecting, right? You must do what is best for you. That's the point of the wolf pack, about becoming self-reliant. So getting back to this, now that we've completed that 47-day phase and I've been transparent about what I'm anticipating next, which is the relief rally, then we have the timing element of it all, which is into the upcoming annular solar eclipse on February 17th, which also happens to be the Chinese Lunar New Year, the year of the fire horse. And the reason I'm putting emphasis on this event is because the day prior, or what we can call the last day of the year of the snake, will be the 47th day of this year. So we have this 47 code again, and we should not ignore it, especially since it's associated with the snake year. And all of these major events tied to the 47 code have happened during this year of the snake. And this isn't just the case for crypto. And you're all aware of the historic breakout we had in silver quite recently. And silver is the 47th element on the periodic table. This is something I've actually talked about regarding my decoding system going back to the release of my crypto mastermind in Q1 of 2021, almost 5 years ago. So this is not new for us talking about the periodic table and silver at all. We've been talking about this for half a decade now. So when I showed how silver back then got rejected at the $47 level for the first time in 1980, and then it was a double top again in 2011, I also talked about this leading into the Shemitah year, 2021, and also 2022 quite a bit, because a lot of people were expecting silver and gold back then to start the crazy parabolic advance that we're seeing now at the end of 2025 into 2026. And I was warning people back then to not accept that analysis so seriously and don't bank on it, because we were about to enter a Jubilee year, which is something that only happens once every 50 years. So just to jog some of your memory, if you're brand new to the Wolfpack, maybe you've never heard these things, some of you that may have joined us back in 2023 or 2024, this is pretty much what we've been covering since the beginning of Waters Above. So we're seeing this code come to life this year, and I believe it's happening for a reason. And we're seeing something occur on the world stage that feels like a first in many ways. And that right there shows us that timelines are kind of shifting and things are accelerating. And well, we have a very disruptive technology entering the world as we speak. It's artificial intelligence, and it's kind of already done its damage. I'm not personally anti-AI. That's funny enough, it's going to be a big theme of what I'm building behind the scenes, the new Renaissance philosophy, and everything that I've been kind of gearing up for in 2026 revolves around this inevitable adoption of artificial intelligence, and where does blockchain technology fit into the conversation is very important, right? So we're not in the same world as we were in 2020 or 2015, 2010. Things are accelerating, and I think it's really important for us to take that a little bit more seriously, because if you're assuming the traditional ways will stick around for much longer, again, not to be discouraging, but I hope that what we talk about moving forward inspires you to perhaps make some changes. I think it's very important due to what's to come. So that'll definitely be like an energy moving forward here at Waters Above and for our mastermind community, is what we can do that's a solution amidst the changes. And I hope you appreciate that. I hope you value that. I think it's important to value that, especially where we're at right now on the world stage. So right now, we're seeing almost a half a century later, finally, silver breaking out into price discovery, all tying back to that 47 code that I was talking about. So this is exactly why I'm focused on February 16th into February 17th being this 47th day of the year here in 2026, and the final day of the year of the snake. So we're kind of in that mode right now where the snake is shedding its skin, if you will. And this will be leading into our first full eclipse of the year on February 17th, the annular solar eclipse. And of course, we can't forget the total lunar eclipse a couple weeks later, which will be into the date March 3rd. So just really quickly, reminder, March 3rd is the Gregorian 3-3 date, 33, and it happens to land on the day leaving 303 days left in the year. When you practice the rules of numerology, you're going to end up with 33. The master number of transmutation effectively changing from one form to another. Just make sure my microphone is good. Great. And perhaps some of you remember last year on the dates of March 2nd and March 3rd. Let me just quickly zoom out to take a trip down memory lane. These two dates right here, Sunday when the market was closed, but the crypto market was trading alone. We had that really viral Trump Truth Social post that came out. Perhaps some of you remember. It was mentioning this crypto strategic reserve, and even XRP and Cardano were mentioned along with a couple other projects, Solana, etc. And those 2 days ended up creating what I call a Twin Towers candle structure. It's not a joke though. You know, this was pretty wild to see Bitcoin go up 9.5% in a single day. And then for all of that to be given back up a day later. And this was effectively from a tweet. You know, so it shows the power and like kind of the influence that Donald Trump had during this time, and that's reminiscent actually of 2021 with Elon Musk, and everything that was going on with him. And funny enough, when we fast forward to this timeline we're in, we had the introduction of Doge, this what was it called? Department of Government Efficiency, I think. I might be wrong with the acronym, I apologize, but that launch was so fascinating because it's like it feels like we're in a mirror, a reflection of 2020 in a lot of ways. And that will come up a little bit later in today's podcast, kind of the idea here as we move into this year of 2026 and progress through Q1, which could very much have a similarity to Q1 2021. So we had this event over here, March 3rd, the 3-3 date. Then the following move here was, well, that was a bull trap, and we proceeded to head lower into the first total lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle. You'll see this green box transitions to red because that was the start of our lunar cycle. And we're still in the lunar cycle, by the way. As you can see, we're still in this red box, which, now that I mention it, that's the perfect segue into this upcoming eclipse season that we're about to experience in February, March. And with this upcoming eclipse season and how it could go based on another pattern that we've been focused on lately, since it's clear in the charts that everything that happened in 2025 month by month was the polar opposite of how 2024 played out. While we have March and April over here of 2024 extremely bullish, last year March and April was the polar opposite. We were pretty much crashing into that time frame. Then while crypto specifically was in euphoria in Q4 of 2024 leading into Q1 of 2025, we were experiencing extreme greed, closest thing we've had to euphoria since. And then just recently in the end of Q4, at the end of 2025, we were experiencing depression and extreme fear in the crypto market. And we're still feeling those effects to this day as I record this Red Pill podcast. So it's clear 2025 was a mirror of 2024, but as above, so below. Not obviously a mirror in the traditional sense, but in its ripple effect sense, you know, as it moves outward, for example. I like to just simplify it by saying the New World Order's favorite phrase, as above, so below. And now that we've reviewed that pattern, what is actually quite interesting is how Bitcoin also pumped into, let me show you, January 6th of last year. So you see we have a correction, but then we pumped into January 6th into January 7th, just like we did this year, in an almost identical fashion. Actually, if I turn off all the noise, you kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. So just to move up from the start of the year, the pivot into this exact date. And we've been talking about this date for, as I mentioned at the very beginning of today's podcast, for the past 7 weeks in an almost identical fashion. And on top of that, we corrected into this exact date that we're in right now. Today is technically it'll be the 12th, I guess, because the daily close came in. But for those of you in the States, it'll be the 11 still. And we're at the same prices, man. We're pretty much at the same prices. So of course it would be crazy if we were to pump now into January 20th, the 1 year anniversary since Trump's inauguration. But then at the same time, that would kind of be a little bit of a warning for me. And what I mean by that goes back to scenario number two. The idea of like a relief rally that starts to become very noticeable. And when I say warning, it's nothing to get like overly like, to freak out about, but just in general, that would be a little bit of a warning sign to be like, okay, well, get ready for a little bit of a cool off phase. And I know it feels like we've been in a cool off phase, but with the way the markets are operating, the rotational effect could take a moment to play out unless there's an event that occurs, which this upcoming FOMC meeting at the end of this month, I think it's like the 27th into 28th, that could be the trigger effect. And I would just be cautious. So we have some things coming up this week that could kind of set the tone for everything leading up to that FOMC. But I think generally Q1 is one of those months where a lot of weird stuff occurs, and it could be a lot of narratives, a lot of like feeling one way but getting the other. And just thinking back how positive things were at this Q1 2025 and how negative things are here in crypto Q1 2026, this as above so below effect is clear to me. So it's kind of what I'm preparing for personally, is like, okay, if anything is more doom and gloom than it's already been, that's a sign for me to get even more bullish. And that's what all the great investors teach. When there's blood in the streets, you know what to do. Since we saw what happened to the crypto market after Trump's inauguration last year, the crypto president, indeed. It's just jokes, all right? Anyways, getting this train back on the rails, it's also crucial to remind ourselves of how 2021 kicked off for altcoins. Bitcoin was rallying pretty hard, but during this whole rally and correction right there, altcoins were still quite low in the grand scheme of things. Let me show you an example. Let's look at HBAR. So, top in August, boring all the way through New Year's. Look at that. That's right there, New Year's Day, 2021. And then we just flipped bullish. And you zoom in and you see how we were bullish into the date of January 8th. So right there, like at the very beginning of January. And then we had this quick correction into January 11th, which is today, by the way. And are we like not doing the same shit? It's pretty close. Correction into January 11th. Okay. So that's all the way over here, by the way. And then it followed by a pop up into January 20th, 21st. That's the date that we were just talking about a moment ago, 1 year since Trump's inauguration. And then we had a bit of a cool off phase over here. Remember, during this time frame, Bitcoin was continuing deeper into price discovery and Bitcoin dominance was still quite high, but Bitcoin dominance was in the process of starting to roll over, So what led to this whole moment, or what it eventually led to, was the last alt season that we had here in crypto land. So it very much seems like this Q1 here in 2026 is a bit of a wild card, because with crypto specifically, or crypto especially, it's during the months of March, the specific month of March, where we get our extremes. Just like we had the C19 crash in March of 2020. And then with that being said, that is our upcoming eclipse season and the final total lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle. So this puts us in a position to expect extremes this upcoming March as well, which I think a lot of you are already like emotionally prepared for. But the good news is it's around the final lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, which we were just looking at. It's around the final lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle where Bitcoin plants a cycle bottom. So let me quickly show you that and like do a little bit of a decode for you guys so that you can see what we did in past iterations of these lunar cycles. So we're going to start with the last cycle, the one that we just referenced right here. And you see what happened on the final lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle. That was the bottom, the exact dates. It's right here into the 9th of November. And then it took actually, and this is what I want to focus on today, it took around 2 weeks for us to swipe the lows. And I feel like that's something that is now going to become a theme for the rest of today's podcast. You're going to see some similarities here in structure. Of course, the bottoming around the final lunar eclipse and what I'm pointing out right here. So let's now go to the cycle before this. And we have right over here the final lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, and we're going to move forward to see it's about 17 days later we swiped the lows again, and then we started a recovery phase. And this is very similar to the prior iteration we just covered, just 4 days difference, but a nearly identical move, as you can see. Then we have the total lunar eclipse on September 21st or 28th of 2015, 27th into 28th. Regardless, it was a late September 2015. But before we actually review that, I want you to look at the total lunar eclipse on April 4th. This would be the third lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. And you're going to see that we actually bottomed 3 weeks later for like the micro double bottom here, little W pattern. 3 weeks after, and then we went on a 77-day rally. And I find this to be pretty wild. I didn't even notice this until I was preparing today's podcast, but we rallied for 77 days, exactly 77 days before the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle, which, by the way, September is the month we're talking about. That's the true 7th month in the system, as the prefix septem in Latin is 7. And on the 27th date, so you'd speak out the number 27 as 2 sevens, 7, 7, 77. So it's absolutely crazy that it topped out 77 days before the final lunar eclipse on that lunar cycle. And it's just really cool to see this esoteric stuff showing up in the Bitcoin chart all the way back 10 years ago, 11 years ago. That's what's really cool about this. When you start connecting the dots, I mean, it's not as important to be connecting the dots of the past, hence why some of these things just kind of show up when I'm in the midst of creating new podcasts, but it's always cool to see this stuff all interconnected. So 77 days of pump, 77 days before the following eclipse. Just unbelievable. Now, I want you to consider that we're coming up on our third lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle, which you're aware of is on March 3rd. So we do have these threes as our theme. Now, the theme is that we tend to continue to correct until 2 to 3 weeks after that final lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, which in our current cycle, that would give us the dates of March 16th into March 23rd. So definitely keep those dates on your radar, okay? Because we're referencing the correction after the lunar eclipse, but that one being like really important because it's going to feel a lot of energy around this time, not just in the markets, but in the world, like in you'll feel the energy as well. So keep that in mind. This stuff affects humans, right? We know this already about the full moons and the new moons. These eclipses are even more powerful, especially when it's a total lunar eclipse. This isn't a penumbral eclipse or a partial eclipse. This is a full total lunar eclipse amidst an eclipse season. So we're talking back to back. Annular solar eclipse immediately followed by a total lunar eclipse. That's heavy energy, okay? So keep that in mind. Then one thing to point out, because we have a couple things we have after the final lunar eclipse, we're just pumping here, but then we really bottomed about 40, or sorry, we really bottomed over here. This is the actual important one because this would be the one in the future. We bottomed exactly 40 days before the final eclipse of our lunar cycle, the final lunar eclipse. That's what I want us to focus on. Because the following iteration, let me show you, we have our lunar eclipse, and we're bottoming around 37 days prior. So we also have a little bit of a theme here. And just so you're aware, I'm going to reveal to you some more dates. 37 to 40 days before the upcoming total lunar eclipse on March 3rd will give you January 23rd to January 26th. That's just a little over 2 weeks away. That's how close we are to that specific pattern we just reviewed. So let's quickly recapitulate. We have a clear theme of trending down during the lunar cycle, and that's obviously been the case for us here in crypto land. And then we have the theme of bottoming around the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle, which you're now well aware of the date and all the associated dates surrounding that key event, which, by the way, there's just a couple. So with us being here in January, we have one of our two patterns aligning with later this month, really soon, and the second pattern aligning with the end of March. This means we're in the home stretch, as long as this solar and lunar cycle theory continues to play out, of course, which so far it absolutely has. And the only way for this to be quote unquote different this time would be if the labeling of the upcoming eclipses was inaccurate, which would be a user error, and that would be on me, of course. And I could definitely admit that's a possibility. I'm a human after all. So since we never got a true alt season this cycle, all the while precious metals are currently in euphoria, and as of the recent weekly candle close for the stock market, we officially have the Russell 2000 breaking out into price discovery, showing that there's a risk-on environment, and still altcoins look dead. That should kind of provide some context to the big picture here. So is the rotation about to unfold? Well, when we have all this data that we just reviewed, it's highly possible, and that's positive. So Bitcoin is sitting at 90K, although the altcoins look dead. And if we were to look back at how this Bitcoin bull run has played out from Q4 of 2022, since that total lunar eclipse that finished off the lunar cycle, also that was a key date because that was when FTX collapsed and Sam Bankman-Fried went to jail. Since then, it's been a bull run for Bitcoin, and technically Bitcoin is still in a bull run. We're holding structure. There's been zero break of structure, and the same kind of vibe that we had around April of 2025 last year is the same vibe we're feeling today. Meanwhile, we were holding structure while that correction was happening. So that is also very important to consider. But yes, we can't deny how depressing it's been for this market over the past 12 months. But that's just been the story mostly for altcoins. And we've still yet to have Bitcoin dominance break down. So I'm a heavy altcoin holder myself. Of course, I would plan to de-risk or to take profits in any relief that we get, especially if I was the type of person that needed the money, right? Which is not an unsophisticated thing to consider. You know, you must do what is right for you at the end of the day. And I believe that we're about to see major changes on the world stage. So it wouldn't be smart to just have purely hope at this time. I've said this many times, and it does seem a little dramatic, but hope is the rope. Don't let it become the noose. Please consider this, all right? This has always been the case with especially crypto, where people don't have the most sophisticated investment thesis or exit strategy, and then they get very reliant on just this hope mechanism. And the only reason that really affects you on an emotional level is because you don't have your other ducks in order, which I don't say that to be offensive, but just so that we could all be true to ourselves and honest with ourselves. If we're lacking in another area of our lives, we should never expect hope to get us out of that, you know? So there's so many solutions to that problem. One of them, of course, is cash flow. Like, learn to create a business, become an entrepreneur, Take the skills that you have or the things that excite you and convert that into something that could help and benefit other people. That's what my whole last 2 to 3 years has been since I created my expansion project. This shift for me allowed me to align with something that I feel much more connected to. I was never fully connected to blockchain technology. I've been speaking against it for the past 5 years. So you must do what is right for you. And that's not only with your investment thesis and how you invest with your money, but how you invest your time, your energy, your belief, right? I hope I hope this connects with you because it's important. Um, Although I'm aiming to inspire and avoid to discourage, I think it's still important to be honest and true, truth overall. So, with everything that we covered today, and the fact that the majority of retail investors focuses on the 4 year cycle, and then in the recent turn of events, that has shape shifted into the meme of the 5 year cycle. And now we have CZ from Binance calling for a super cycle. It's making me feel that we're actually going to get both. And what do I mean by that? Well, at this point, would you be shocked if both the bulls and the bears get absolutely obliterated? Just like what happened last year when everyone started to get super bearish following Trump's Liberation Day in early April. That was like peak fear. And then just a month later, Bitcoin hit a new all time high. And then it back tested prior resistance and broke into an even higher high. This just happened 1 month after Trump's Liberation Day, by the way, into the end of the month of May. So, this is why my scenario number two that I've been talking about for 2 months now, it just feels right to me for what to expect next. Not because I'm trying to be right, but because of how polarizing everything's been lately. So imagine Bitcoin were to recover to 110, maybe 115K, or even a little bit higher to really induce the FOMO. Because remember, everything's about sentiment, everything's about emotions here in crypto. And then right after inducing as much FOMO as possible and as much hope, we would come back to the 80K region again. And then once everyone starts to expect the typical continuation of a bear market into 60K and lower, at that exact moment when the crowd starts feeling that way is when Bitcoin would actually recover into perhaps the August eclipse season. And then we end up with a structure that's like the bottom of 2015, for example, which you can see this was a very different bottom than the one that we got over here, which was also a different bottom than the one we got over here. So everyone who's kind of copy and pasting what happened in prior cycles and just assuming that's how this bear, quote unquote, bear market is going to go, I don't say this to be controversial or to go against perhaps some of your favorite analysts, but I just don't think that's the right way to look at things. Um, it's like when everyone starts assuming that it's going to be the same winter this year. And then it's usually when everyone is hearing from the weather people, the news, like, oh, it's going to be a horrible, we're going to have so many blizzards. It ends up being like your best winter, you know? That's kind of vibes right now where everyone is just so bearish and so in the dumps. It proves that the market maker successfully completed their operation because that's all this ever was, in my opinion. Ever since Trump won the selection, it has felt like a psyop. And again, just being ruthlessly honest here. So I think we could all remember how much positivity there was from November into inauguration. And then from inauguration, everything just turned. And one thing I do want to mention that perhaps some of you will resonate with is like it feels a majority of these speculative gamblers that were here in crypto land moved over to things like Polymarket. And then also a lot of new AI things have come out, like for example, like vibe coding, and everyone's talking about how you could create an app now and that app will earn you passive income. And the people making these vibe coding tutorials will say, you can make $1 million a month. I've literally seen this stuff and I'm like, what are we doing? It's just people jumping from one shiny object to the next. So it kind of feels like the ecom days, which, by the way, if you guys aren't aware, I was successful as an ecom drop shipper back before I started Waters Above. I did very well with it. I had about 3 successful stores. I had a couple that didn't do so well, but the 2 that were very successful changed my life. And I was able to actually pivot away from that and got into crypto with the profits that I made. And I needed to shift because C19 closed down all of my stores. I pretty much lost everything regarding my cash flow, but my savings, I was able to adapt and make a pivot, which is kind of how today feels, not necessarily to pivot away from crypto, but it's what it feels like with regards to like everybody is jumping to some shiny object right now. That is totally how the start of, I would say, 2019 and some of 2020 felt. And then when like the wrecking ball came in March of 2020, there was like a moment where everyone was shell shocked. You know, it was like, oh my God, I didn't think that this was possible to lose my mom and pop, my mom and pop shop that I had for 30 years or 20 years or whatever. Like that wasn't crossing people's minds as a possibility. So to get back on track and to share my point here is when I got into ecom, it was right at that golden age where a lot of people were just like shilling that you could all open up an ecom dropshipping store and you'll do amazing. And that was total bullshit. I'm seeing that reemerge in this vibe coding thing with utilizing AI and Claude to make these apps. Now, I'm not trying to discourage people away from perhaps learning how to do these things because they are, I suppose, important skills moving forward. They are important skills moving forward for sure. It's just people don't understand the saturation it's going to create in the App Store, for example. Why doesn't anyone want to talk about that? That was the same thing that happened back in drop shipping when it went from like 10 to 100 people doing really well with fidget spinners to now everybody in the educational space is teaching people to do fidget spinners, and now it's saturated and no one gives a shit. Trends die. So all the trends that we saw over here with the pump fun and all the crap happening on the Solana blockchain, it's over, man. And that really unsophisticated investor has moved on and has pushed their gambling addiction to Polymarket and to these other shiny objects. And again, no disrespect to anyone who did that because there's money to be made in the process. But unfortunately, what happens during that whole transition is you never acquired a real skill. So when that next trend dies, you're left with having to find the next trend, and then it's a never-ending search. It's like being somebody who's a record exec looking for the next big artist when you yourself could have learned how to become an artist. Like you could learn how to grow your own food instead of waiting for the day where the food quality gets better or when there's the food shortage. Whatever. I'll end this here, this idea, but I hope it resonates with you at like why I don't talk about a lot of those things, because I don't feel like they benefit humanity. You need to tap into something that actually means something to you, something you're passionate about. Don't waste all your prana on the shiny object du jour. All right. And I think crypto was very much that for a lot of people. It was just a shiny object that people got involved in. Usually when it's in euphoria, it's very positive. And when people are here at the peak depression sharing wisdom, nobody really cares. That's just humanity. And I understand that. I completely understand that. So getting back to this idea of a structure that could be more similar to the 2015 bottom, it's not out of the realm of possibilities because we are in a moment where it's kind of felt like a Bitcoin only thing. And back here, it was a Bitcoin only thing. It didn't really become like an altcoin conversation until this cycle. I mean, that would be glorious if Bitcoin has a cycle like this next. I mean, we didn't have a blow off top in the last cycle, and we haven't had a blow off top in this one as well. So we're feeling like we're just building more and more support. And that's actually a very good thing. And coming back to the idea of the rally into the start of the solar cycle, which is very much likely to be in August during the August eclipse season, right over here. That could mean that we have then a August new moon flash crash to shake out all of the leverage on that run up, and then we recover into the February annular solar eclipse in 2027. Now, that's a play that I'm giving you 1 full year in advance from this podcast here today. And if that confuses anyone here, don't worry. In plain English, that would mean the macro bottom for this cycle is in this year of 2026. And since we've almost had a full year of being in a downtrend for the altcoin market, and officially 1 full year since the last time we were even close to the sentiment of euphoria, that can mean that the bottom is actually a lot closer than most would think. We talked about this with Dogecoin in the last red pill, talked about this with Solana in the last red pill as well. And it seems to be when you have Ethereum barely making a new all-time high, when it's always had the theme that it's had in every cycle that it's been with Bitcoin, we didn't even get price discovery with Solana either. We didn't even get price discovery with XRP. And some of the privacy coins that are popping off right now, they haven't entered price discovery either. They're just balancing out, they're catching up. So this is a setup, and it could very well be a generational setup. Now, I don't want to go too far ahead of myself. Since we've set the tone here in today's podcast, let's pivot over to the charts to do some traditional technical analysis to identify the setup moving into the week ahead and take things one step at a time. But I do feel really happy to share a long-term outlook with you all, because it's very much the way I think. It's always been the way that I think, to have some forecast for the long time horizon. Of course, that's the whole point of investing anyways, is to be long-term. Now, any fractals that you see, they're nothing that is pointing to any calls or predictions. That's not the point. A lot of the times when I've been utilizing fractals lately, it's because many people have started to rely heavily on them. So I've played around with some, and I do find some fascinating fractals to entertain, but by no means do I have any utility for fractals beyond their experimental use. I would also recommend people, if you see somebody using fractals too heavily to make that be their form of analysis, then yeah, I don't know what to tell you, but just be cautious. Ooh, very interesting to see XRP breaking down a little bit. So XRP, like, major move up too quick. It does this a lot. I don't love seeing that, but we did break out of a really long-term falling trend line, which we'll talk about in a moment. But getting to Bitcoin and where we're at, I think it's important to actually turn off all the noise and look at where some of our moving averages are right now. Oh, where are we at on the weekly? That's actually pretty important. Okay, so we held on the weekly 8 simple moving average with a close above it. Now we've gone on 2 full weeks technically, but last week did feel like a little bit of a false breakout, although not prices that are new to Bitcoin since the end of last year either. So you're aware, we're sideways right now. We're sideways at the lows. Recovering above the 34 weekly moving average is my target. That would be very ideal. That sits around 99,244, but one step at a time. Getting back above the 13 EMA would be fantastic. So getting back above that 13 EMA and then actually holding that zone for some time would be great. But Bitcoin's in one of those kind of moments right now in history where we have one event, and that event can shift the energy in minutes because of social media, because we have all this interconnectivity to each other. And that's something to watch out for. After we have these long, boring phases, it's very typical for something to seemingly happen out of the blue, you know, where you wake up one day and you're like, what the hell's going on, right? So that's sort of what we're dealing with right now. When something becomes very boring and very like not talked about, so it's losing its popularity, that's when we get to see big changes. Daily chart is coiling up, so I would assume our Bollinger Bands are tightening. Yeah, for sure. And the 2-day. Wow. Yeah, so they are definitely tightening up, and you could see a clear rejection at the top side, 2-day top side band. I haven't spent too much time on the Bollinger Bands, but I will start being a little bit more technical in my decodes moving forward and maybe not as much decoding stuff. I don't think people have complained too much about it, but maybe you guys could let me know your thoughts. Balancing out is always great, but a big reason why 2 years ago I shifted away from being too technical was because nobody understands it. And I don't want to make stuff that you can't learn, right? So I've had a couple of people complain, which is fine, lately, that I'm not doing enough TA and that my TA sucks. And first of all, I find that really funny. But furthermore, it's because nobody was learning when I was like super TA nerd. I've been doing TA professionally for 5 years. I've been a professional trader for 5 years, but I need to create things that actually elevate people and they understand. And not everyone's at the same part of their journey. It's the same thing with decoding. Sometimes decoding is insanely difficult to learn because there's so many layers to it, right? TA is the same way. So anyways, I'll aim for more balance moving forward for sure. But I don't want to get too technical here because then it's just a bunch of smart sounding words and then you don't learn shit. So just being real. So 2-day doesn't look the best, but it doesn't look the worst. 3-day doesn't look the best, but it doesn't look the worst. I do like this support being held in the 13 EMA for sure. Where we have at the RSI. Okay, so we are feeling like we're building what's called a bear flag. Okay. Now the bear flag play, we just had a perpetual sell-off and now we're building this kind of falling parallel channel. And the parallel channel is rising, like it's building what looks like a trend reversal, but it's no concrete break back above key levels. That's how bear flags look. And I don't love to trade patterns here, but this is a very clean bear flag. Bitcoin needs to make a decision soon. So I don't know if a lot of other analysts are talking about this right now. I'm sure they are because a lot of people love to talk about patterns. If that's coming up on the radar, then I would not be shocked that Bitcoin does the opposite. Bitcoin loves to do that shit. When everyone's expecting a bull flag, Bitcoin breaks down. When everyone's expecting a bear flag, Bitcoin breaks to the upside. So just keep that in mind. And then ultimately, we have the 55 simple on the weekly sitting at around 101K. And when we break below that level, it's very normal for us to at least come back to it, as you can see over here, if we are to get rejected and continue the downtrend. So thing to keep in mind though is 101K is not far from here. So this does look similar actually with the first top test of the 55, first top test of the 55, secondary top, not much higher. Come down to the 55, break below it, come down to the 55, break below it, and then now we can see the 55 simple is stalling and it's curving to the downside. So that's not a good look. But it would just be so weird for them to do it the same way that they did it before, because this was not the same way as they did it before over here. The bear markets weren't the same. I mean, you could keep going. So there will always be something special about a bear market or a bull run. And if we had just one of these bull runs, actually really quick, so we could pivot and move on. What's really kind of similar actually about this bull run is the 2017, but our corrections are just like 5 times longer. So if I was to show you what I mean by this, it's not even important actually to show the moving averages. It's just we have a bottom and then we rally to the top, but along the way we had like, let's call it 30 to 40% corrections. And that's been our thing this cycle with 30% corrections, 30 to 40% corrections, except it's taking a lot longer. So this one was quick. This was a quick recovery, quick, and then blow off. I mean, damn, we're doing like kind of something a little similar in that way. And yeah, I also have talked before about how this structure right here, like these two distribution, they're like micro distributional tops. That could be the play that we're in right now. So we recovered off of a bottom and then we had a peak. I should zoom in so you could see what the hell I mean. Let me just speak in plain English. What happened over here is what's happening over here, just on a larger scale. That would be some shit. That would definitely be some shit. So the idea here is that if we were to continue into price discovery, that we would have it be kind of like an elusive move into price discovery, which is what happened all over here as well. Um, but yeah, I would love to know some of your thoughts on that, like this double distributional top kind of vibe. Because when we had this secondary correction, a lot of people were thinking that this is not going to get better. And then it was funny because right here in the October lunar solar eclipse, yeah, the October solar eclipse, every altcoin went crazy. Absolutely crazy. Like if you bought before that October 2023 solar eclipse, you got in some really good positions. And then that eclipse just kind of sealed the deal on it all, and we continued up after. In a way, that's I would love that for August. I know some people might hate that I'm saying that, but in a way, I would kind of love that for August. Like if we were to just hold sideways through August, we'll have some relief along the way, some quote unquote corrections along the way, but then like once August rolls around, just boom, pop. That'd be pretty legit. Of course, my desires are not the same as reality, but that would confuse the shit out of everyone, and that's kind of why I don't hate that theory. Okay, so we're looking at Ethereum. It's the same story this week. We don't really need to spend too much time on ETH. Inverse head and shoulders play is still happening, in my opinion. We can see left shoulder head, right shoulder developing, and it's in the process of kind of catching up to the same amount of time that we traded at the lows. And now it's just like, when do we get this glory candle, right? So over here, this one was all induced by Trump euphoria with him winning the selection. And then we made this like unfortunate double top, or not, I won't even call it double top. It's just an unfortunate recovery to a resistance, which then followed with a really devastating correction for ETH, especially because at the time ETH was boring. Like Bitcoin was already breaking into price discovery, and then to see this type of correction on ETH at that time, it's pretty nuts. This is 64% correction. So again, we have yet to have a euphoria moment in Ethereum, and that's very strange. It's almost feeling like on a larger scale, kind of similar to what I told you before. On a larger scale, we're repeating this moment where we have the C19 crash and recovery is the same as the tariff crash and recovery. And then this top to this backup phase is what it would be called, is what we're completing now. And it's just taking longer. Let me know what you guys think about that. But otherwise, there's really no point of doing any TA on the same story. All right, so we're seeing XRP coming back to this key level of 204. This type of move is not weird for XRP. We've been seeing it for a long time now. It's held on this $2 zone for 400 days. Okay, so good news about this is if you were somebody who invested in XRP back at the last stair step, which it was like 40 cents, this is not a bad place to be sitting at for a 400% gain for over a year. You know what I'm saying? So not everybody's in the same boat there. But with that being said, I love how stable XRP is at this $2 level. Sure, it's come below $2 a bunch of times, but does that matter? I don't think so. And if XRP was to break even lower, that doesn't really faze me. I think it's actually a buying opportunity. And I haven't invested in XRP in a long time. So like I'm kind of getting used to $2, and I think many of you might be as well. And if I told you that back in 2023 or 2022, you'd be like, no, no way. No way would we get like desensitized and used to a $2 XRP. So I honestly can't share too much more of an update here just because we've broken above our, let me just show you real quick. This is just a return back to the chart that I shared in the recent update. We broke above this 90-day resistance, but the way we broke out was very violent. And now we're kind of in that phase of perhaps there's a potential to repeat this similar fractal. I wouldn't bet too much on it, but it's this idea over here, kind of like this really jagged recovery back to around $2.70. So at this time, it's all about what Bitcoin does next. If Bitcoin is at these levels and Bitcoin dominance is holding, then altcoins are just going to chop around. And what's kind of nice about this is if Bitcoin decides to move up and Bitcoin dominance comes down even slightly, then alts can do some crazy stuff. And it's because of Bitcoin's market cap being so high right now, and also where the stablecoin dominance is, particularly USDT. So I think this is a very clear setup right now into a relief rally move for Q1. And we're already kind of getting the initial first part of that as we talk. So let's move on to AMP. Now, AMP had a pretty interesting move up into January 7th, or January 6th, along with many other things. This one was particularly January 7th, pretty wild. And now what the structure's starting to look like to me is kind of like over here, where we just had this arduous sell-off and then we popped up and then now we're getting a little bit of resistance. And this doesn't last long. So if you were to look at that structure over here, it was pretty nuts. I know it doesn't seem like it, but that's a 6% candle. That's a 10% candle. This lasted for about 3 weeks. That's a 20% correction. That's a 19, almost 20% correction. This type of chop that we're getting right here is very normal for an altcoin, especially one like AMP. So another thing that's really fascinating is this also had a major move into into the date of January 7th, which we just did with AMP. And yes, it had a really messed up correction into around January 25th. But look at what that led to, man. Like, look at how quickly from January 28th oh my God. I'm not trying to get anyone's hopes up, but this is crazy type of alt move that happens in crypto. This was 2 weeks. This thing went up 930%. I mean, damn, that'd be absolutely epic if this project could do that again. It's not impossible. It has these major spikes up, and that's kind of just to do with Bitcoin dominance rolling over. So at any time if Bitcoin dominance rolls over, it's normal for this project to put on 500% or more. It's from this move to here, it's 400%. And now that it's super oversold, I mean, for it to come back up to those levels, again, about 500 to 600%. Keep that in mind, man. That's really kind of where we're at right now in crypto land. So this is not the best looking chart on earth, but it could be a major macro double bottom between October 23rd and December 2025, 2 years apart. And in a way that's actually nice that it has yet to go lower than 2023, because we have been seeing some projects that have been breaking even lower. Although I would not recommend to like go all in on this project right now. I would be cautious and I would treat this as venture capital. Also, this is a project that I personally invested in. I think I did a bunch of de-risking on March 17th. There's another project we're going to look at that I did the same with. It was Polkadot. And I ended up buying back into this, and I'm most definitely in a loss on this for sure. But I'm dealing with a project that I put a very small investment in, and with any recovery, it's an opportunity to de-risk, and I will make a lot more money than whatever's at the loss because of the nature of this type of altcoin. It could just do a crazy straight line breakout overnight. It's kind of what we're dealing with here. So next is a project called PAL AI. I've never covered this project. Okay, so this will be fun. Oh, I hate you guys who give me these charts. You want to know why? It's a joke. Because I like these charts. I like when the chart looks so fucked, because it's like, if it's all the way back at where it launched, of course we can't be like, yay, that's good, nice to see. But what we can say is it's lost 98% of its value. It's not weird for it to do this type of pop right there. So this could be in the process of recovering all the way back to this horizontal level. And that would be a nice investment. Of course, it's a trade moreover than a sophisticated investment. I wouldn't go ahead putting your whole portfolio in this, but it's actually good enough right there. 10 to 14 cents. But then remember, right now we could have something like this occur. Major move up, right here, major move up, and these corrective patterns can be incredibly elusive, but 300%, not bad, especially if you were buying any of this crap over there. Damn, it's like right after New Year's, a lot of things just shot up. So just look at around this range. I don't know if at this time I could entertain much higher than that. I would call that like kind of a Hail Mary pass because the structure is horrible. And then once we broke through this main structure over here, it just tumbled, right? It went on to give back everything. That's why when I analyze charts that look like this, I just mark off the key horizontal levels and I assume that this is an area of importance for us to return back to. And it's not a bad assumption. It's a very normal thing to see because that's where a lot of volume was built. It was a volume, it was an area of support initially on a 3-month sideways consolidation, a cool off phase before it had its final parabola. And then since come back to back test, a bull trap, back test, holding support, which by the way, this lasted probably 4 or 5 months. Yeah, there you go. And then we broke down. So that's why this is not weird for us to come back to these levels. And of course, we could hyperextend a little bit more, maybe 17 cents. We have a lot of tests at that level, but it's when you start going higher than that that it gets a little bit like you're guessing, because all of that liquidity, it's very quick moves. And for it to go from here to here is already quite a buyback. You feel me? So we would be probably overheated on some on the 2-day, 3-day, perhaps even 5-day RSI just by getting back up to these levels. So be careful. Another thing you could do is you can entertain the idea of like a macro automatic rally. And the macro automatic rally, there you go. Look at where it is, 0.5 to 618. It's a very common level to get rejected at, the dead cat bounce idea. I don't know if I'd be calling for this thing to go much, much lower than here. It would have to do what is Bitcoin going to do, maybe Q4 this year. But just keep in mind that that's a normal level for us to come back to just from a basic technical perspective. So it's the 17-cent area that I called out. So keep that in mind for PAL AI. Next is Stronghold, SHX. Now, guys, I don't have the full chart of this. Unfortunately, I think the chart that I used to use was from CoinTrader Pro, and like they're gone. That happens, right, in crypto. They're not making enough money or something happened. I'm not even gonna make a joke. All my jokes lately have been not funny. Bad. All right, so I'm just a couple of extensions of the lines because it's been some time since I've looked at the Stronghold chart. What I don't love is the fact that we came up within that like barely kissed the golden ratio, the 1,618. So I assume that I called this out in the past because whenever I see that, I don't get excited personally as an investment. I will not buy anything that's approaching this critical target. Why? It's not because I'm bearish on the project. It's just because I could clearly tell that it's much more of a guess at that point if it can go higher. And I've seen this happen so many times where it gets close to that level and it doesn't surpass. And that's where it's like, well, why would I just repeat the same mistake there? Unfortunately, a lot of these things start becoming popular and people want to talk about them when they're already close to that level. And that could have been the case for Stronghold. I don't remember, nor do I really care. But what we've seen since is this parallel channel that was here as a support, a rising support going back to August 2024 has since broken. And when it broke below right there, came back to it and got rejected. So that type of rejection there and push lower, it's showing the continuation of the downtrend, which now is happening for 140 something days, which is pretty cool actually. So this had its all-time high during summer of 2025, and probably like a much better move than ETH or Solana. I mean, shit, dope. I think even XRP had a little bit of a run up in July last year, but not nearly anything like this from what I remember. So, very nice play. Hopefully, there was some de risking done. But we've come back to a critical level, the zero point 0.5 fib, and I like that because you see here, we came to this zero point 0.5 fib level, we were holding, and then that was make or break. But since we back tested and it was a classic bounce level, and then from there, 400% since we've come back to test it again. So with this losing already 80% from the top, it's reset. And I think where it's trading, and this might be controversial, especially for people who don't like this project, but I would feel that this is at a fair price. So around 1 penny. It's at a more fair price, and that's just looking back at what it's done over the past 700 days. It's been really enjoying this, let's call it 6 to 0.006 to 1 cent price, which is great. Now, as for is this a good investment right now, I would be cautious because prior support can flip into resistance. So even if we are to come back all the way up to 2 cents, which is a decent play, it's personally not enough for me at this time. And then simultaneously could turn into a head and shoulders because you got your left shoulder, head, right shoulder idea. Wouldn't bank on it, but as a speculative altcoin and with the condition and like state of crypto at this time, you really want to be more on the side of de-risking anything that's in profits instead of banking on this like it's gonna be an alt season thing. You know, that's a really dangerous mentality to have, and I think a lot of us have learned that we're not in the same cycles that we've experienced in the past. And for the most part, that's been the case because I showed you Bitcoin's last bear market did not look the same as the prior bear market or the one before that. Also, Bitcoin's last euphoria cycle did not go the same as it did in 2017 or the way that it did in the prior cycle either. So there's always changes as, of course, market cap grows and the community around it changes. So yeah, it's been enjoying this project Stronghold has been enjoying these major spikes up, but then it's been met with resistance and a continuation of the sell-off. So I'd be careful here. And then I personally wouldn't invest in this at this time because it's already kind of completed the move up to that 1618. And when we zoom out, we see where it was back at the end of Q4 2023. That's 7,000%. Okay, so you want to be cautious in expecting this to go much, much higher. In my personal opinion, it's done a hell of a move already, and now it has completed an 80% sell-off. So perhaps some people might want to nibble a little bit, but I'd be careful. I'd personally be careful at this time. Now we're gonna look at Polkadot, which I haven't looked at in some time. Ooh, wowie, wowie zowie. All right, we are back. Ooh, I was not expecting to see this chart look like this. So, quick story, I sold my Polkadot position back on March 17th of last year in 2025, and since then I have not bought back in, which was the case for several of the positions that I sold on that date, but some I did buy back, such as the project that we just covered, AMP, which I talked about, which is in a similar, like probably a similar loss actually to Polkadot. But this is not great to see. By the way, just a quick story. I actually bought Polkadot in like this first month of it being a project, which was pretty crazy to look back and like it was like $4 and then it went to like 40, you know, fucking madness. So yeah, I don't think I got out perfectly at the 40, but it was somewhere in like that 25, 20, 28 zone. Anyways, just crazy to think about how long ago that was. Now, looking back at DOT, I took a loss on it personally, and then I just rotated into other stuff, and then I kept some cash on the side for what I believe were better opportunities. And now that I'm looking at it dump all the way back to where it like effectively launched in 2020, that's a sign that that was a pretty smart idea. Even though there was a lot of AI plays that I was in that also did not do too well that I de-risked at that time. Yeah, it's just a sign that this market has become something different. And that's where we're at right now. So back in the day, Polkadot and the Kusama project were killing it, you know, huge in the space. And it almost actually, and this is going to sound funny to some people, but it feels like crypto became less sophisticated in this cycle that we're in now. Like it became even like it's more degen, which is super sad, man. Because I remember over here when the NFT shit started coming out, I was like, oof, people are buying digital yachts for the same price as a real yacht. People were buying like NFT art that today is down 99.99%. Like an 8-bit picture, profile picture. People were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for, which is like whatever, you can't convince people whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't need to go there, but that to me felt dumb. I'll be honest, that felt dumb. And ever since the pump fund stuff and everything that's happened with the meme coins and everything in Q4 of 2024, it feels like it's gotten worse. And then all of this year, it also felt like it just got worse. So there's like not so much sophistication in crypto right now. And I think we need that all to go away, all the unsophisticated players to go away so that we could like rebuild. But then I look back at projects like this where I'm like, how this was such a dope project, and like I still feel like the community behind this was solid, and you just look at this price action, you're like, wow, what happened, man? So yeah, shout out to Polkadot. I only got out because I didn't want to continue to hold a bunch of those positions that I was in, and I already did well on it in the first cycle. But yeah, this to me is another one of those signs of like, damn, crypto did not grow up, because this was one of those players that I thought was going to do very well. But yeah, in all positivity, this is wild to see DOT at $2. I mean, back in 2021, if you told somebody that you got in a DOT at $2, they'd be like, what? How? You know? Today it's wow, it's crazy. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap this up. I mean, do with this what you would like, but this is broken below a major support. And if I can add value for you guys right now, I personally think this is a spring. So that's actually a good thing, because spring is kind of like rock bottom in a distribution phase. And this would be your area to expect a test, which is the area that we broke down from, which you can see going back to January 2020. Oh my God. January 2023, 3 years ago, that was our first test. And then so this would be called a selling climax, because that selling climax was met by this automatic rally. And then that turned into your double top. M pattern has probably fully played out. I don't know if this can go much, much lower unless it's obviously going to zero. But for now, this would be a really good place to pivot and to go back to your support. So that's around $4. Although that would be like not even break even for most people. So what I can say though about a spring is after your spring and your test, let me draw it out for you. It looks kind of like this. You have a backup phase, and a backup phase comes back to here, but it could take time. Consider this was at the end of 2021 and we're at the beginning of 2026. So these things can take some time. But ultimately, in any move back up to here, you should consider de-risking. I mean, to anticipate this thing to come all the way back to like the 888 fib, that would require Bitcoin to probably move into 170,000 or something. Like seriously, I mean, think about it. Bitcoin over here was 69,000. So the people that hear me say that Bitcoin would need to be 170,000 for this thing to come up to here, well, think about what Bitcoin did between here and here. Bitcoin's 91,000 right now. It was 69,000 when DOT was $55. So I'm not just making this shit up to like to bother people. Like, that's facts. This thing's down 96%. Well, if you bought the top of Bitcoin's bull market, you'd be up today. I mean, 30%. It's better than being down fucking 99% or whatever, you know? Just be honest. So yeah, be very cautious with this stuff and de-risk when the time comes, you know? That's all I could say. All right, now we're going to finalize today's podcast with Zbeck. I don't remember the last time I covered Zbeck, but let's see what we're working with here. This is a project that a lot of people want me to talk about, and we see a top going back to May of 2025. A fucking crazy move, by the way. Wow, that's after the tariff crash. Oh my God. Oh yeah. No, that's toast. Okay, so a couple things. One, this operated like a reset for this project. It shot straight up through the 1618 and then perpetual lower highs off the 1618, and then it's corrected since. 60%, a full 70% correction. This can keep getting worse. Um, I don't say that to discourage, but really just actually, let me look at it from this perspective. I apologize. Yeah, I don't want to bank on that. That's like the same as what was it? PAL? Was it the PAL chart or Stronghold? No, it was Stronghold because I have the PAL was the first time today. It's similar to the Stronghold chart where it's like it came up right before the 1618, right? I deleted it, whatever. But I'm pretty sure that was the one we were looking at. Now, because I feel like we're about to pivot in Bitcoin, that means that this 4004 to 0.005 is possible to come back to. It's really holding the top of this golden pocket well. So I can't deny that. I can't deny that. We're talking going on 2 months now of holding this after we've had a devastating correction across. Okay, so this is not the most bearish chart. This is solid. I just worry because it's come very close to the 1618 already. So it's like believing that it'll go much higher is where it could get dangerous. Because this kind of happened to the Caspa people in the last cycle, where like yes, it made an insane move, but then people were just predicting and expecting that it'll keep happening and happening and happening, and that's not how it works, man. Eventually something reaches a price that nobody agrees on anymore, and then it has to come back to a fair price. So coming back to this level here is nice to see. This is not the most bearish chart, even though it's been in a downturn for the last 225 or so days. It's still holding a bullish structure in the macro, all things considered. And this might not even be the full term chart. So sorry if I got a little ahead of myself at the beginning of this review, but the possibility of this pushing up to the 1618 for the complete move or even a little bit higher into this upper price target that I saved from the last time I covered this is very possible. I don't want to bet on that, you know? And then again, it's like you're hoping for a 250% move when something's already entered price discovery, when there's so many more opportunities out there. So yeah, like this is not a bad play if you're somebody who's already in profits in this thing, and we do push into a bullish phase up until the next eclipse season. Definitely consider de-risking. If you got in at these levels here, for sure consider de-risking because you're already in such an incredible investment, you know, to get out of the trade. So this is a decent looking chart. I like how it's come back to the 888 fib. It's holding. This is a key level that it's spent a lot of time at. So there's a lot of volume built here. I'm just a little cautious at this time getting into projects that have already broken into price discovery recently. I would rather buy things that look like they're really oversold, but that's not always the greatest strategy. Ultimately, though, my investment thesis is to stick heavily with XRP, HBAR, XLM, and then obviously I have a big Bitcoin position, I have a gold position, and then I try to be a lot more smaller in my allocations for the other stuff, for the stuff that I'm, yeah, I'm just okay with going to zero if that was the case. Also, the render play looks like it's doing really, really good as well, coming back up to the top of this prior resistance. That'd be interesting to see that break out. And there's plenty of other good plays that I know are out there that are opportunities, such as Tau, Sui. A lot of people I hear talking. Virtuals is another one. So there's a lot of options right now for those of you that are looking to make some newer investments. I would just be cautious right now on this crypto market, especially if you're somebody who's deep in the red. You know, you don't want to go like reverse, or, sorry, you don't want to go revenge trading in this time just because things are starting to feel a little bit more positive. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. We got an hour and 25 minutes. This was Red Pill 250. Big milestone for Waters Above, and I'm so grateful to be a part of your journey. For those of you that have been here for a single red pill, or if you've been here for 100 red pills, it really means a lot to me. I pour my heart and soul into these podcasts. It takes me a full day to make them, and I just really appreciate your support, truly. So, I mean, everything I said at the beginning of this video, I will continue to push towards inspiration and against discouraging. You guys mean the world to me. I'm going to wrap this one up. Hope you all have a beautiful week ahead in the Matrix. Much love.